Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about assessments. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, why do you think that software developers face assessments through nonsensical coding questions when writers aren't judged by things such as spelling bees or mathematicians aren't assessed on math olympiads or things like that? Can you explain the rationale? Yes, I think I can. So the thing is, guys, it seems weird to you, I know, that someone would go and say you're a good software developer or a bad software developer based on your ability to implement the FISPAS algorithm, for example, or the Fibonacci algorithm or graph traversal or something like that. And at the same time, you hear from like seasoned veterans that all that is completely irrelevant because we never use it practically in anything. Like I've only so far in my career, I've only ever had to implement a graph search or graph algorithm once, I think, for a specific situation, and that was a very specific system we were building at that time. But for the most part, it's been not that relevant for me in terms of everyday work. And so your question, of course, becomes, okay, but then why do people use that as a way to evaluate me if that doesn't matter? And the thing is, if you think about the things that seem weird to you in not just software development, when we have these sorts of gatekeeping, like these sort of things we do in order to evaluate something or things like that, think about politics or something similar to that. Why do you think we have all the issues that we have, and all the classic one is all politicians are stupid, and the government doesn't know what they're doing, etc., etc. You think that that is exclusive to the government? The same thing is happening in everywhere. If you go to any of your friends, just go and ask any of them, and just ask that question: do you think that you're doing something weird at work or something that seems stupid? Every single one of you, every single one of them will have, we have this idiot in HQ, like in the management, who's doing A, B, and C, and oh yeah, that department is really stupid, they don't understand this and that and so forth. This sort of inefficiency, it's everywhere, literally everywhere. And it usually comes down to the fact that people have different ideas and people have different levels of wisdom and insight into whatever goals or work it's being, what we're trying to achieve together. And this is no different. So when you say that, I wouldn't go as far as to say that I agree that a coding challenge is equal to, getting a writer to check if they know how to spell or something like that, or a mathematician to perform an Olympiad. The goal of all of these things is to evaluate whether or not the person that you are interviewing for a candidate, as a candidate, as for a position or something like that, that they actually know enough to be applicable for the role. Now the problem comes, as I've said in many times before, guys, there are no requirements basically on engineering managers or leadership within software. You will find that the vast majority of your bosses and the people hiring you and so forth have little to no knowledge of software engineering whatsoever. And so a lot of these sorts of nonsensical questions, or these different ways of evaluating, it's try it yourself. If you go to smaller companies that may or may not be like software oriented. I have friends who have their own companies and so forth. They also make up their own recruitment and hiring policy and so forth. In some cases, I mean, they don't even have any type of checks apart from you do a nice interview with someone and you seem like a nice person, and then they have a good gut feeling about you, and then they hire you. This is the same thing. So the person who's making you that nonsensical algorithm question is just trying to get a good gut feeling about you, and they think that by giving you this challenge, because they don't know the work, they don't know what's relevant or not, they're just going to pick something that seems to be the thing. And that's usually what happens, guys. Like, people are selling these ideas and trying to promote, CATIS and lead code and so forth, like all of these sorts of things. That's like, you and I may know that may not be the most relevant thing in the world, but you and I are software developers. We do this work every single day. Your manager most likely does not. So just as I would probably fall for the same thing. It's like take insurance, for example. I don't know anything about insurance, so what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to try to see if someone else claims to know something about insurance, and I'm going to go with their recommendation, even if it's the dumbest thing in the world. I don't know any better, and the same thing can be applied here. So when people are challenging you with these sorts of computer sciencey questions and so forth, there are usually one of two reasons going on. Either they're ignorant about basically what to evaluate, or they're trying to optimize for a low effort screening process. So one of the things I usually tell people is that if you're not Google, don't try to do the exact same thing as Google does, because if you can, as you can imagine, if you try to create a hiring process that is high quality, where you invest a lot of effort into evaluation, like you have a code challenge that is very relevant, it's very, the sort of code challenge that usually gives you a good indicator as to why someone is good, if someone will be able to work with your particular stack. That requires investment, and that might work if you have like a dozen candidates, or say a few, maybe 100 candidates coming through the pipeline. If you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people coming every single day, it's going to be very expensive for you to maintain that sort of process. So you want to have some type of basic screening process that can be fairly cheap. And as I said, the coding challenge, like the nonsensical computer science thing that you were talking about, it may not be super relevant, but it is code. It may not be fair, it may not be perfect, maybe it's flawed in every single way, but at the very least, it's like the most basic thing that you can imagine that I can present to you, and you will not be able to do it if you have no coding knowledge whatsoever. So the only thing I'm really establishing here is that yes, you can pass a coding challenge, and maybe that is enough for me, just so I can see, all right, they passed this upfront coding challenge. It's just an algorithm type of thing. That means that they at least have some knowledge. Therefore, it's better. Now I can move you to phase 2, where we might do different types of evaluation. But if I don't do that, I might have to invest a lot of time in you or things like that, and I don't want to do that. So that's the other thing of this. And I usually find that companies are dealing with one or two. Either you have management who doesn't really know their own work, they don't really know what they're looking for or how to evaluate things, so they just go with something that is a best effort type of evaluation, which is the thing we're talking about here. Or you're dealing with you're just trying to establish a low investment screening process where you don't have to deal with a lot of complexity and like do a lot of interviews and things like that. You just want something simple. So what I want you to take away from this is that I wouldn't go as far to say that mathematicians and writers have, like, as the examples that you're taking in this question here, I would say that any writer, maybe they won't be evaluated on their spelling. They will probably be evaluated on prior work, or writing a small story, or having some type of work sample so we can tell whether or not they're good. If I were to design something for a writer, I would give them a scene, depending on what we're writing for, just give them an example, a mock assignment, and see, okay, you wrote this thing, and let me take a look at it and evaluate it. Same thing with a mathematician, a math problem, allow them to try to solve it and then go through the solution. This is no different. It's the same thing you would have done for quite a lot of crafts related work, and the same thing goes for actors doing interviews and like trying to get a role or things like that. There's usually always something that you're using to evaluate whether or not this is a person that you can take a chance on, because hiring somebody is a risk. It's always a chance that you're taking. And so for us, it's usually one of two things. And that is it's a little bit unfair because, as I've said before, guys, it's a highly technical field, which means that if you don't have technical people doing the evaluation, it's very likely that it may not be 100% relevant, or so forth and so forth. And trust me, guys, we're not alone. Every single industry in the whole world, you go to anybody and ask them, is there some weirdness going on in your company that doesn't really work for your situation? And they will all be able to complain about something usually, because that's fundamentally the problem, guys. If you have someone who's external or someone who doesn't really know how to do things well, it happens literally everywhere. And so in this scenario, it's usually that you're getting these sorts of questions because the people doing the evaluation, they don't really know how to do the evaluation, so they do a best effort, what they think will be the thing, and then if you pass your test, well, that means that you can probably code, even though you and I may know that that might not be 100% true. The other one is usually that you don't want to have a very expensive process for screening people, because if you have a lot of people coming through the pipeline and you don't have all that much time to just do interviews and like all these other things that might come later, you want something cheap and simple to put up in the front so that at least the people who barely know how to code at all aren't coming into the pipeline and quote unquote wasting your time. Have a great day.